Kyle walked slowly through the quiet forest, holding a scanner in one hand and a small light in the other. The trees were tall and silent, and the ground was covered in leaves and dust. He wasn't looking for trouble, only for scraps. Food, tech parts, batteries, anything useful. Ever since the crash weeks ago, he had survived by searching the land around the broken alien wreckage. Today, something felt different. His scanner beeped softly. A strange signal was coming from the large piece of metal ahead. It was part of the alien ship that had fallen from the sky. Kyle approached it carefully. The metal was twisted and burned, but there was a gap in the wreckage just enough to crawl through. He knelt down and listened. At first he heard nothing. Then, a faint sound. A soft, weak cry. Not human. Kyle's heart beat faster. He squeezed. Through the gap, his light pointing ahead. Inside it was dark and cold. The air smelled like smoke and metal. As he moved deeper, the sound grew clearer. A quiet, helpless cry. Then he saw her. Curled up between broken wires and fallen beams was a small alien woman with pale blue skin. Her body was thin and shaking. In her arms, she held something close, to her chest. A baby. The baby was also blue-skinned, smaller than a newborn human and very still. The alien woman looked up at Kyle. Her eyes were wide, filled with fear and pain. She didn't speak at first. She only held her child tighter. Kyle raised both hands and knelt down slowly. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said gently. She blinked, then opened her mouth to speak in broken English. "Please. My milk has dried up, human. My baby, he hasn't eaten for days." Kyle froze. The words hit him like a punch. He looked at the small baby, so quiet. Too quiet. Its skin looked dry and its mouth opened slowly as if trying to cry but too tired to do it. The mother looked at Kyle with shaking lips. "He will die. Soon." Kyle didn't know what to say. He had never seen an alien like her before. He didn't know her species, her name, or how her baby survived, but in that moment none of it mattered. He put his scanner away and reached into his bag. He pulled out a bottle of water and held it out. She didn't take it. "For you," he said, "and him." Slowly she accepted it and gave a few drops to her baby's lips. The baby moved, just a little. A small sound came out. Not much, but it was something. Kyle knew they couldn't stay there. The cold metal was dangerous. And they had nothing. "I'll help you," Kyle said. "But we need to move. There's a small shelter nearby. It's not much, but it's warm." The alien mother looked at him with tired eyes. She didn't speak, but she nodded. Kyle picked up pieces of cloth and wrapped them around the baby. Then, with great care, he helped the woman to her feet. She could barely walk. He supported her with one arm, and they slowly stepped out of the wreck. Outside, the air was cold but fresh. The forest was quiet. Kyle led them toward his shelter, a small hidden hut built from wood and scrap. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing. He couldn't leave her, and he couldn't let the baby die, not while he was still breathing. Kyle walked slowly, supporting the alien woman as they moved through the forest. She was weak, but she held her baby tightly against her chest. The baby had stopped crying and was now breathing softly. Kyle could feel the weight of the situation. He had never expected to help an alien, especially not a mother and child. The shelter was just ahead. It was a small hut made from fallen trees, metal sheets, and old cloth. Kyle had built it after his ship crashed. It wasn't much, but it was dry and warm inside. He helped the alien woman sit down on the softest spot and gave her a blanket. Then he carefully lit a fire in the corner of the hut. The gentle warmth began to spread through the room. "What's your name?" Kyle asked as he poured some warm water into a small cup. She looked at him with tired eyes. "Thera," she whispered. "My name is Thera." "And the baby?" he asked. Thera looked down at the child in her arms. "His name is Seren," Kyle nodded. "I'm Kyle." Thera gave a weak smile. "Thank you, Kyle." Kyle handed her the cup of water. Drink, slowly. She took a few sips, then looked at her child. He needs special nutrients. I don't have them anymore. My body is empty. My milk is gone. Kyle frowned. What do you mean? Can't he drink water or food paste? Thera shook her head. No, his body is too young. He needs something from me. A mix of things. Warmth, proteins, and connection. Without it, he will fade. Kyle sat back, thinking hard. He wasn't a doctor. He didn't understand alien biology. But he knew one thing. This baby needed help fast. I have some food paste from the wreck, he said. Maybe we can try something. Slowly. Maybe his body will accept it. Thera looked unsure, but she nodded. We can try. Kyle took a clean spoon and placed a small drop of the food paste near Siren's lips. The baby stirred. His eyes fluttered open for a moment. Then he turned his head slightly and swallowed the tiny bit of food. It worked, Kyle said, a little surprised. Thera's eyes filled with hope. Again, she said. Kyle gave another small drop. Siren swallowed it too, but then his small body trembled and he let out a weak cry. He's too tired, Thera said quickly. Too weak for more. Kyle stopped. He didn't want to make things worse. Thera rocked her baby gently and looked up at Kyle. There is a place, a trade post, north from here. I remember the maps. Maybe they have what we need. Maybe someone there knows how to help. Kyle thought for a moment. He knew the place. It was a mix of travelers and alien traders. Not always safe, but full of resources. If anyone had something for Thera's kind, it would be there. Okay, Kyle said. We'll go tomorrow. You need rest tonight. Thera looked down at her baby. Will he make it through the night? Kyle looked at Siren. The baby was still breathing, but very weak. He didn't have the answer, but he put his hand on Thera's shoulder gently. We'll do everything we can, he said. Thera didn't reply. She just nodded and held her baby closer. That night, Kyle stayed awake by the fire. He watched over them both, ready to leave at first light. He didn't know why, but he cared deeply. This wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about saving a life. The sky was still dark when Kyle packed the supplies. He didn't have much. Some water, food paste, a few tools, and a small power cell for emergencies. He wrapped them carefully into his old bag and checked the route on his scanner. The trade post was at least 2 days away, and the path wasn't easy, but he didn't hesitate. Thera sat quietly in the corner of the hut, holding Siren close to her chest. The baby looked even smaller now, his breathing soft and slow. Thera looked up at Kyle with worry in her eyes. Are you sure? She asked in a soft voice. Kyle nodded. We don't have time. If we wait, Siren might not survive. Thera gently stood, her legs shaking. Kyle helped her wrap in warm cloth, and then he picked up a hover cart from outside, an old device he had repaired for carrying supplies. He placed some padding inside and helped Thera lie down with Siren in her arms. I'll push the cart, he said. You just rest and keep him warm. The journey began. They moved through the forest, slowly. The morning air was cold and the ground was wet with dew. Birds flew above and small creatures ran between trees. But Kyle stayed focused. Every hour mattered. As the sun rose higher, the forest became thicker. Fallen branches and broken rocks blocked their path. Kyle used his tools to clear the way. At one point they reached a steep hill and he had to pull the cart with both hands, sweating under the weight. Thera tried to help, but she was still too weak. I'm sorry, she whispered. Kyle shook his head. Don't be, just keep your baby safe. By the afternoon, clouds covered the sky. Rain began to fall, light at first, then stronger. Kyle pulled a tarp over the cart to keep Thera and Siren dry. He kept walking, his boots sinking into the muddy ground. Hours passed. At night, they stopped near a cave for shelter. Kyle made a small fire and gave Thera some warm water. She looked exhausted, her hands shaking as she held her child. He is colder, she said. His skin is losing color. Kyle looked closely. Siren's small face was pale, his eyes barely open. "I have an idea," Kyle said. He took out the power cell and connected it to a small heating pad. He placed the pad under Siren's cloth to warm his body. Thera touched her baby's cheek. A small sigh came from Siren's lips. "It helps," she said softly. They rested, for a few hours, but Kyle didn't sleep. He sat by the fire watching them. The journey was only half over and the worst might still come. But seeing the baby respond gave him strength. By morning, the rain had stopped. Fog filled the trees, but the path ahead was clear. "Let's go," Kyle said. Thera looked up, her voice weak but hopeful. "Thank you, Kyle, for not giving up on us." He smiled slightly. "We're not there yet, but we will be." As they moved forward through the misty forest, Kyle pushed harder. He felt the pain in his arms and legs, but he didn't stop. He knew the trade post was close, and he also knew time was running out. This was more than a rescue now. This was a mission to give life back to a child who had never even known safety. By the time the sun reached its highest point, Kyle finally saw the edge of the trade post in the distance. It was built into the side of a rocky hill, surrounded by strange machines and old ships. The place looked broken, but alive. Smoke came from metal chimneys, and the smell of cooking oil, fuel, and chemicals filled the air. Thera sat up slightly in the cart, holding her baby tightly. "This place, it looks different from before," she whispered. Kyle nodded. "A lot has changed since the war." The guards at the gate, two large creatures with thick arms and yellow eyes, watched them carefully. Kyle raised both hands and showed he had no weapons. "I need help," he said. "There's a sick child." One of the guards stepped closer and looked at the alien baby in Thera's arms. "That species? Rare. No doctors here know them," he grunted. "I don't need a full doctor," Kyle said firmly. "Just someone who understands alien infants, or something that can help feed him." The guards didn't stop them, but they didn't offer help either. Inside the market town, dozens of stalls lined the narrow streets. Different species moved around, trading parts, food, and tools. Some wore long coats. Others had masks or robotic arms. It was a place where no one asked questions, but also where few offered kindness. Kyle went from stall to stall, showing Siren to merchants. Some looked away. Others asked for too many credits or gave useless advice. Thera grew weaker. She whispered, "He is fading." Kyle's heart pounded. There must be someone. Finally, a small voice called out from behind a wooden stall. "Wait, that baby. He is Viralan, isn't he?" Kyle turned to see an old alien woman bent over and wrapped in soft cloth. Her skin was dry and pale green, and her eyes had seen many years. Thera nodded slowly. "Yes, he is." The old woman stepped closer. "I was a nurse under many years ago. I cared for Viralan infants during the early colony days." "Can you help him?" Kyle asked quickly. "I can try," she said, "but I need ingredients, and time, and you," she pointed at Kyle, "must agree to something." "What?" Kyle asked, ready for anything. "If the mother dies," she said calmly, "you must care for the child. He must not be left alone. Viralan babies need a bond to survive. If she is gone, you will become his bond." Kyle looked at Thera. Her eyes were full of fear, but also trust. "I agree," Kyle said without hesitation. The old nurse smiled and nodded. "Then follow me." She took them into a small tent behind her stall. Inside were bottles, herbs, and strange tools. The smell was strong, but not bad. "Give me time," she said, and began to mix ingredients in a bowl. "This will not replace the mother's milk, but it will wake the body. It may allow her to feed again." Kyle and Thera waited in silence. Siren lay still in her arms, his skin pale and cold. Finally, the old woman gave them a warm liquid in a small tube. "Start with this," she said, drop by drop. Kyle carefully helped Thera place the tip near Siren's lips. A small drop entered his mouth. Nothing. Then, his tiny hand moved. His mouth opened slightly. Thera gasped. He's swallowing. A small hope returned to her eyes. He may survive, the nurse said, but the fight is not over. Siren lay quietly in his mother's arms as the nurse watched closely. The warm serum seemed to be working. His skin had gained a little color, and his chest moved more steadily now, but the old nurse was not smiling. "This is only the beginning," she said softly. Kyle looked at her. "What else do we need?" The nurse leaned over a small table and opened a pouch. Inside were dried leaves, crystals, and tiny blue seeds. "Thera's body must restart the milk-making process," she explained. "Her species does not respond to machines or chemicals. Her system listens to natural signals. If we feed her body the right mix, and if the baby stays close, her milk may return." Kyle nodded. "Give me what's needed." The nurse held up her hand. "Before I do, remember what you promised. If she doesn't recover, the baby becomes your responsibility. You can't leave him." Kyle looked at Thera. Her face was pale. She was barely awake, holding her baby tightly. She opened her eyes and looked at Kyle. "He needs someone," she whispered. "Even if it's not me." Kyle didn't hesitate. "I'll protect him. I'll raise him, no matter what happens." The nurse finally nodded and handed him a pouch filled with crushed ingredients. "Boil this in water. Feed her small amounts every 2 hours. Keep the baby on her chest. That connection is the only thing that can restart the bond." Kyle prepared the drink at the edge of the tent. The water boiled in a small metal pot as he mixed the herbs in. The smell was bitter, but warm. He poured a little into a cup and held it to Thera's lips. She sipped slowly, each swallow weak but steady. Time passed. Kyle stayed at her side, feeding her drop by drop. The nurse gave more instructions and helped watch the baby. The trade post grew louder outside, but inside the tent everything was quiet and focused. By nightfall, Thera had taken 4 doses. "She's doing better," Kyle said hopefully. But the nurse shook her head. "She is still very weak. She may not survive the night. If her body fails, her heart may stop." Kyle sat down beside her and looked at the small alien child. Siren had stopped crying, but not from peace. He was just tired. That night, Kyle didn't sleep. He held the heating pad near the baby, kept the fire going, and helped Thera drink as often as she could. At one point, she opened her eyes again. Her voice was soft, but clear. "I was afraid of humans. But you are not like the stories." Kyle gave her a small smile. Maybe the stories were wrong. Thera looked down at her baby. "If I do not wake up tomorrow, name him something strong. Something human and virulent. You'll wake up," Kyle said gently. "We're not giving up yet." She closed her eyes again. The fire crackled, and the wind outside howled against the thin walls of the tent. Morning slowly came. Kyle leaned forward, checking the baby first. Siren was still breathing, slow but steady. Then he looked at Thera. Her body was still. Too still. "Thera," he said, leaning closer. No answer. He touched her hand. It was warm. Then her fingers moved slightly. Her eyes opened. "I'm still here," she whispered. Kyle let out a breath of relief. He smiled and nodded. "Yes, you are." And for the first time, Siren let out a small, soft sound, a tiny cry that filled the tent with life. The tent was quiet as the first rays of morning light came through the thin cloth walls. Kyle sat beside Thera, watching her breathe. She was still weak, but she was alive. That was enough for now. Siren's soft cry had broken the silence earlier, and it had filled Kyle with hope. The baby was responding. He was still so small but no longer silent. Thera slowly opened her eyes again and looked at Kyle. "Is he okay?" Kyle nodded. He made a sound. It was soft, but it means something is changing. Thera smiled weakly and looked down at her child. She held him close, and her fingers gently touched his tiny cheek. For a moment she looked peaceful. The nurse entered quietly and sat beside them. "You've done well," she said. "Both of you. The baby's energy is rising. And Thera, your body is trying." Thera blinked, confused. "Trying?" The nurse nodded. "We will know by tonight. If the child feeds naturally again, your bond will return." Kyle looked at Thera. "Are you strong enough?" "I don't know," she whispered. "But I will try." The nurse gave more instructions: how to rest, how to breathe deeply, and how to hold the child close without stress. Kyle helped every step of the way. He fed the fire, brought fresh water, and even stayed awake while Thera slept during the day. That evening, something changed. Siren began to move more in his mother's arms. His small hands stretched and his lips searched for warmth. The nurse leaned close and touched Thera's side. "Now," she said. "Let him try." Thera adjusted herself slowly. Her body was still sore, but she was calm. Kyle turned away slightly to give her privacy, but he listened closely. The air was still. No one spoke. Then they heard it. A quiet sound. Siren had begun to nurse. Thera gasped softly and held him tighter. "He's feeding," she whispered, eyes wide with emotion. "He's really feeding." The nurse closed her eyes in relief. It worked. Kyle smiled, feeling warmth in his chest. "You did it." "No," Thera said, looking at Kyle. "We did it." Tears rolled down her cheeks, not from pain this time, but from joy. Her child was safe, finally receiving what he needed from her once again. Siren's small body relaxed in her arms as he fed. His skin slowly regained more color, and his quiet sounds became steadier. Kyle stepped outside the tent for a moment. He needed fresh air. The sky above was full of stars, and the trade post lights glowed softly in the distance. He took a deep breath and looked up. A few days ago, he was just surviving. Now he had helped save lives. The nurse stepped beside him. "You have done more than most would," she said. "Many would have walked away." Kyle shrugged. "I couldn't." She nodded. "You are different. That child will grow up strong. Because of you." Inside the tent, Thera softly hummed to her child, rocking him gently. She was tired, but now filled with hope. For the first time since the crash, she believed in tomorrow. Kyle looked back at the tent. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew one thing: he wasn't alone anymore. 3 days had passed since Siren began feeding again. Each day the baby grew stronger. His soft cries were now full of life. His tiny hands reached up often, searching for his mother's face. And Thera, though still recovering, looked brighter, stronger, and full of a new kind of energy. Kyle stayed close. He brought food, fetched clean water, and repaired the heating pad in the tent. But most of all, he simply stayed there. For them. The old nurse smiled as she watched the small family. "He'll grow up healthy now," she said. "You did more than save them. You gave them a future." Kyle shook his head. "We all did." The market town remained busy around them. Ships came and went, and travelers passed through, never staying long. But news of what Kyle had done began to spread. How a human had saved an alien child, not with weapons, but with heart. Some traders brought small gifts, blankets, fruit, even a tiny toy made of wood. Others simply nodded in respect when they passed Kyle. For Thera, the kindness was new. She had grown up hearing that humans were dangerous, cold, and selfish. But now, sitting in the safety of the tent, watching her child rest peacefully, she knew better. One evening, she called Kyle to sit beside her. "You kept your promise," she said gently. Kyle smiled. "I said I would. I thought I had lost everything," she continued. "But now, I see hope again, because of you." Siren let out a soft laugh in his sleep, making both of them smile. Kyle looked at Thera. You're the one who fought through the pain. You never gave up. Thera shook her head. I only survived because someone stood beside me. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind outside and the quiet breathing of the baby. Later that night, Kyle looked around the trade town one last time. He had made a choice. I'm not going back to the forest, he said the next morning. I'm staying here. I'll build a small home, something real. Thera looked surprised. You would stay for us? He nodded. You're not just someone I helped. You're family now. Tears filled Thera's eyes again, but they didn't fall. She smiled, holding Siren close. Then this child, she said softly, will grow up with love from both worlds. Kyle spent the next few days gathering supplies. Some aliens offered old parts. Others shared building tools. Near the edge of the market town, Kyle began building. A small shelter made of stone, wood, and metal. Simple but strong. A place to grow. One evening, as the sun went down, Thera stepped inside the new home for the first time. She looked around slowly, then sat beside Kyle with Kieran in her arms. The baby reached out, touching Kyle's chest with a soft hand. Kyle placed his hand over the tiny fingers. Hey, little guy, he whispered. You made it. Siren looked up and smiled. That night, as stars filled the sky, the small family sat by a warm fire. A human, an alien mother, and a child born from another world. But now safe, together. In a galaxy full of fear and war, something beautiful had grown. A bond made from kindness, trust, and hope. And for Kyle, this was not the end of the journey. It was the beginning of something far more important. A life worth protecting. A family worth keeping. A story worth remembering.